celebration. Simcha, Simcha, the celebration of life.
Hi from me, Jared Epstein, and welcome to Simcha, a celebration of life. In today's show, we learn about effective communication. We take a hike along the Bricha Trail and we introduce Rabbi Liebenberg's book, Wisdom from the South. Can you express yourself effectively in 140 characters or less? Should you? In Jewish philosophy, communication is more than just a tool. It is who we are. Humans are defined as communicative beings with communicative souls, and aligning ourselves with our soul is our reason for being. Rabbi Kievman elaborates further.
Today we're talking a little bit about communication. How's your communication with your spouse, with your children, with your parents, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your coworkers, with everyone and anyone? We communicate every day. We are social creatures. That's what we human beings do. We interact with people, whether we're shopping or at the bank, whether we're at work or in school or at home. So pretty much after breathing, communication is the single most vital and important thing we have in our life. Now what's interesting is, if you look at the biblical taxonomy of life in the world, we have one thing called domem. Domem are the inanimate objects of this world. Water, rocks, those minerals are inanimate. There's no life to them. That's called domem. The second category is called tzomeach. Tzomeach literally means what grows. It's the vegetative, the botanical sphere. That's tzomeach, things that grow. Although there's life to botany, nevertheless, it's not the same as the next category, chai. Chai means life. In the animal kingdom, animals are alive. They're living creatures. Although the animal's quite different from the human, it's very interesting, we're both mammals. And in recent scientific research, we'd be in the same category. Humans and animals, both mammals, both in the same category of life, of the animal kingdom. Except we're a little bit wiser. The difference being that we human beings stand only on 2 feet with our head towards the heavens, towards upward, whereas animals have both their legs and arms on the ground, their head looking towards the soil. Something I've previously mentioned about the animals being engrossed in the soil, because animals are narcissistic, they're self-centered, it's all about themselves. Even the kindness and the goodness, and animals have souls too. I'm not degrading the animal, but the animal, it's about its own survival. It's about its own instinct. It is I-centered. But a human being has a godly soul, and that godly soul is why we have our head upward and we look up towards the heaven. It's the S-O-U-L. It's not about focusing on oneself, but rather focusing on another. And don't just ask God what God could do for us, but what can we do for God? And so the difference being between the human and the animal focused on the soil is S-O-I, all about itself, whereas the human is S-O-U, about the other. We are communicators. And so although some consider the human as another mammal, just part of the animal kingdom, according to the Torah's division of the 4 different kinds. Again, we said domem, the inanimate. The second, tzomeach, the vegetative. The third, chai, the animal kingdom, which is alive, but different than the human being. Science calls the human being homo sapien. We're clever, we're smart, we're wise. But the Torah calls the human being midaber, articulate. We speak, and that's what distinguishes us human beings from our furry friends. Furry friends are lovely, and they could communicate too, but not the same way as we human beings do. And that's why in the Torah's description of a human being, we are midaber, communicators. That's what we do, we communicate every day. The question is, how do we communicate? With many things, the more we do it, the better we get at it. How many people do you and I know who are communicating for decades, and they are terrible at their communication? So how do we become more effective in our communication skills? Well, just as you could pick up any book from Dale Carnegie to Stephen Covey to so many other great authors and books and workshops that have collected data, so much data from human beings, but that data itself has flaws. I'm personally a fan of those books. I love reading them. I love taking workshops and classes. But there is one challenge with those is that the researchers have studied people. And maybe people in America are different than people here in South Africa. Maybe people in different periods of time. A couple of decades ago, they didn't have the same challenges we have today. Today we have our cell phones, we have our computers, we have television, we have so many distractions today that they haven't had in the past. And so communication is something, even if we've been doing it for so many years, we could certainly work on improving it a little bit. And that's why I want to focus a little bit on some ideas from the creator of the human being, Almighty God. And in the Torah, God's wisdom, ethics, and ideas could really enlighten and shape our communication skills. So let's start from the very beginning. If you open a Bible to Genesis, the very first chapter where God creates the world. How does God create the world? Is it Murray and Roberts? Is it another construction company? Well, no. God doesn't seem to hire any developers to create the world. God speaks and the world comes to be. Let there be light, and there was light. Let there be vegetation, and the vegetation grew. And it wasn't that God said, let there be light, and then created light. Rather, let there be, and it was. You see, communication, speaking, is revelation. God spoke, and it revealed God's creative energy, and the world came to be. We look throughout the Bible, throughout the Torah, and we see many instructions from God. Vayomer Hashem, God said. Vayedaber Hashem, God spoke. And we see so many instances of that. The 10 Commandments, God speaks. God speaks. The Torah is a revelation of God's will and wisdom. And when you and I speak, we're also revealing our thoughts, our feelings, our ideas. So perhaps we could glean some ideas from the Torah, and we're going to do so over the coming few episodes. We're going to talk a little bit about ideas that we could glean, tips and tricks from the creator of the universe, from the creator of you and I, on how we could communicate much better.
The JNF Bricha, or Escape Trail, is a new project adopted by the Jewish National Fund of South Africa. The commemorative trail is located in the Carmel forest of northern Israel and is 3 kilometers long. It's an educational project that includes observation points and explanatory signs along the way which tell the history of the heroic Bricha movement. So kick back, relax and escape with us as we explore the JNF Bricha Trail.
Bricha movement is a very emotional movement. These people rescued 300,000 Jews, victims of the Holocaust. After the war, Europe was full of these thousands of refugees, many of them connected to South African families. And we wanted to actually ensure that the younger generation has a little bit of their history. And the only way we could do this was to we couldn't go to Europe and mark out the Bricha Trail. We decided with JNF Israel to have a trail which set out the different posts along which were Europe and paid tribute to this wonderful movement who rescued all these people.
To my great sorrow, this chapter of the journey to the promised land after the war is pretty much forgotten. In between the tragic drama of the Shoah and the heroic drama of the fight for the country, for the state of Israel, the way in between them was somehow lost. The Bricha movement was a movement that started even before the end of World War II, when northeastern Poland was freed from the Nazis by the Red Army. Jews, and this is the Bricha, had started organizing to help each other, to be there for each other, and to think of ways to go to Israel.
שביל הבריחה היה חשוב למירי נהרי, שהוא בעצם ידמה את השבילים שעברו היהודים באירופה, בסיוע של תנועת הבריחה. והשביל כאן בכרמל הוא מדמה במשהו, בקצת, אולי את השבילים שהם עברו. השבילים היו הרבה יותר קשים למעבר, והרבה יותר אנשים גם עברו בשבילים ההם, אבל השביל הזה לאט לאט מקבל את הפנים שהיו שם, כשבעצם הרבה יותר, כל פעם יש יותר ויותר מטיילים שנכנסים לשביל.
We construct many walking and bike trails in our forest, and usually we try to find a route that combines both nice views, sometimes shade of trees for summertime, and along these trails, especially when it is an educational trail, we try to develop lookouts, thematic lookouts that can tell stories. And here the decision was that the escape trail will include a few lookouts along the trail, and in each lookout we will tell a different story of the escape from Europe to Israel.
It's incredible to think how after 5 years of war, of a horrible war, they still had this determination to go to Israel, to make themselves a home where they could be on their own, in their own country. And on the way they hit stations like DP camps, displaced persons camps, which UNRWA from the United Nations has created. There were about 10 million displaced persons roaming Europe. Everybody was going back home to his country, to his city, to his street, and to his family. Jews had no country, no city, no house, and no family. So when the Jews came, the DP camps, the displaced persons camps, were for people to rest and to be fed and clothed and then move on to their countries. Jews were stuck. So they moved from one camp to the other on their way to the shores of the Mediterranean, to the Hapala ships, to the Ma'apilim ships that were waiting for them to take them to Israel.
אלדנבורג ואלבז'יך, הבריחה הייתה והם הקימו את מה שנקרא הקיבוץ. ואספו שם את כל היהודים שהסתובבו באירופה, באזור הזה. ומשם הם הכווינו אותנו לגנוב את הגבול לצ'כיה, וצ'כיה היינו לא הרבה זמן, ואז לקחו אותנו הבריחה וגנבו את הגבול לאוסטריה. עכשיו, כשהגענו לאוסטריה, הם רצו לשכן אותנו במחנה שנקרא אבנזה. אבנזה היה מחנה השמדה, ושם היה קרמטוריום. ואנשים אמרו, פה אנחנו לא רוצים לגור. פה לא רוצים להיות. מחנה השמדה, לא. משם לקחו אותנו לווינה, לרוטשילד הוספיטל.
They talk about 300,000 people that had, the Bricha had helped move, and I read by a historian that said that this was the greatest organized immigration movement ever.
הגענו לנמל חיפה, ואז כל האנשים עלו על הסיפון, פרסו דגל ישראל, שרו את התקווה, הורידו אותנו לחוף, הכניסו אותנו לאונייה הבריטית שנקראת אמפייר קומפורט, לקפריסין. בקפריסין היינו שנה. היינו במחנה קיץ 55, מחנה של אוהלים. ושם גרנו שנה שלמה. ואחרי זה, ב9 ביולי 48, עלינו ארצה מקפריסין, ומשם עברנו לכפר הנוער הדסים, ליד נתניה, ושם הייתי 17 שנה. אמא שלי עבדה בכפר הנוער הדסים 30 שנה.
My hope is that many people will walk this trail and will learn, even if a little bit, about this amazing story of the Bricha and how Jews, after such a calamity, came out so victorious. That's my hope, that this part of the modern Jewish history will not be forgotten.
The Bricha Trail is a very new project, and it's only now being publicized in South Africa, and Israelis are just getting to know about it, and groups from the army, from the Air Force, from the general public, and possibly from our South Africans who have immigrated to Israel are going to join together with us in promoting this and paying tribute to this wonderful movement, without whom, who knows what would have happened to these people.
Rabbi Liebenberg's first book, Wisdom from the South, is a collection of over 100 original essays on the weekly portions of the Torah. The essays touch upon many contemporary subjects, including the alienation of youth from their heritage, Jewish education, the increase of superhero films, and the challenges of urban living. We caught up with Rabbi Liebenberg to hear more.
For many years now, I've been writing a weekly essay on the Parshat HaShavua. Every week we read one section of the 5 books of Moses, and I've been writing now for some 18 years an original essay on the Parsha. And people have been suggesting to me, why don't you put it in a book form? Put it in a book form. But of course there were close to 800 essays. So how exactly am I going to do that? So I've been collecting them, I've been editing them, looking at them, choosing them, and I've really been writing this book for a very, very long time. It was always in the back of my mind until eventually I decided I'm going to do it. And I found a publisher, and we had a certain time frame, and we had to work within that time frame. So I selected 2 essays on each parsha of the week, and an essay that had to do with something topical, something that was going on in the world at that time, but related to the narrative in the Parsha. And that is how the book came to be born. So the choice of what essay to actually select was very, very difficult. Of course, it had to speak to me. I had to feel that it was something original, something that was creative, but it had to speak to the readership. And I was writing this book generally for the Jewish community of South Africa, but beyond, English speakers. And therefore, I would select on average about 5 essays and send it to the editor. The editor would come back and say, well, this essay is out, this one is too lengthy, this one's too complicated, this one is missing the point, or maybe take 2 essays and put them together. That was really the most difficult part of putting the book together, that initial selection. It's a very difficult thing for an author to do, to have to sift through that information until eventually you come up with the correct choice. I think when one's writing a book and you have an enormous amount of material, it's actually very difficult to be objective. How can you be objective? You wrote it. You're subjective. Often a particular story or a narrative, an essay speaks to you, but the editor will come back and say, well, this is just a little bit flat. This is not going to speak to the readers. And you feel somewhat disappointed, but you get over that disappointment and you try to look at it from somebody else's point of view, because ultimately you're writing a book not for yourself but for your readers, for your readership, and they've got to relate to that. So yeah, there were times when it came to editing the book that I felt a little bit shortchanged, that I wanted to put in a particular essay. The editor cut the essay and said, it's a lovely essay, but it's not for this book and it's not going to work. And I think ultimately we really did come up with a good product. I think the main thing when it came to writing the wisdom or producing the wisdom from the South is that it had to be visually a very attractive book. We wanted that it should be a hard-covered book, that it should have a dust cover, that it should be attractive in every way, that the way that the fonts were designed and the spacing of the book is very, very readable. It had to be a readable book. It comes from a lot of material which is complicated, which is complex, from the Talmud, from the rabbinic writings, but it's been distilled in such a way that the reader can relate to it. What I want my readers to do is that every single week when they're studying the Parsha, to look at the essay and to think, how is that relevant to my life at the moment? How is that relevant to the world in which we live in? How can we take a document which is 3,300 years old and see the relevance in it? How does it speak to us as people today? That's really the main thrust. That was my design behind these essays of this book. I didn't write Wisdom of the South for scholars, certainly not. I think that a scholar could take the book and get a lot from it. And that's one of the main reasons why I have very comprehensive footnotes and a bibliography. That a scholar could look at the essay and think, well, that's a great idea, but I want to develop it a little bit further. It's more simple, it's more straightforward. I want to develop it further so that they could look in the footnotes and say, all right, I'm going to go to that particular source and I'm going to learn more. But the book, by and large, was written for a regular Jew. You don't necessarily have to have that much background or knowledge, but that you're interested in learning. That's the main thing. So it doesn't appeal just to the religious market, but I think it should appeal to any person living in the 21st century that's interested in acquiring wisdom. Many people have asked me, where did you get that title from, Wisdom of the South? And my thinking was as follows. There is so much literature, Jewish literature coming out, but it's all coming out of America. That's where most of the English writers are. Tons and tons of new titles almost every single month. Who's writing anything in Africa? Who's writing anything in South Africa? I wanted South Africa to have a voice on the whole global stage of Jewish literature. So the first thing is, this is wisdom that comes from the South being South Africa, but not just South Africa, the southern tip of South Africa, Cape Town. And that's where Wisdom of the South came from. But more particularly, I wanted to attach it with a source in the Talmud. And the Talmud has an interesting law. It says that when Jews pray, they should face towards Jerusalem, wherever that may be in the world. Sometimes it'll be facing north, east, west, south. So you should face in that direction. But at the same time, if you want wisdom, you should turn a little bit towards the south. You should incline your body to the south. Why the south? So the Talmud says because the menorah, the golden candelabra in the temple, was in the south. And that light represented the light of wisdom and understanding. And the way that it's phrased in Hebrew is Harotze sheyachkim yadrim. One who wants wisdom should turn a little bit to the south. And that, in fact, is the Hebrew title of the book. So the idea being, you know what, you're not going to just find wisdom in the great Torah centers of learning in the northern hemisphere, you're also going to find them here in the southern hemisphere.
That brings us to the end of another exciting episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. Go ahead and see if you can express yourself in 140 characters on our Facebook page. From me, Jared Epstein, and the Simcha team, we wish you a healthy and communicative week ahead.